CNN host Jake Tapper was noticeably fed up with Congress and specifically Republicans as they tried to avoid a government shutdown again last night. They eventually did, but Jake Tapper had multiple wonderfully relatable responses to all of this during his show yesterday. Before watching, let me give you the context. You're not experiencing deja vu all over again. This is yet another new time where they barely averted a shutdown. The reason is because they keep extending funding for just a few weeks, but they haven't agreed on an actual fiscal year 2024 budget. So while they continue to negotiate that, they keep passing these extensions essentially. And once again, no surprise, the hardliners are angry within the GOP at Speaker of the House Mike Johnson. We'll get to that a little bit more in depth later in the segment, but if Mike Johnson eventually helps bring enough Republicans to the table to agree on an even remotely reasonable 2024 budget, the hardliners are likely going to try to kick Mike Johnson out of his job, the McCarthy situation all over again, because they want huge concessions, all the concessions from Democrats, and they want them right now. So that's where things stand. And because we've gone through this thanks to MAGA Republicans so many times in the last few months, these barely avoided shutdowns because they refused to help fulfill a basic obligation of governance, Jake Tapper was rightfully very bothered having to cover it all again. And this was broadcasted during the afternoon yesterday before the bill was passed. Here are a few moments.
Back to our politics lead, but not the presidential race. And yes, this is a story that I've told you countless times over the past 10 years. And I can't believe I have to tell it to you again. But the U.S. government is supposed to run out of money tomorrow. And the U.S. government could shut down, although Congress is currently working on a short-term fix right now. Let's go to Manu Raju on Capitol Hill. Manu, I can't believe we're doing this again. It's just staggeringly incompetent and disgraceful. All right, moving on. This afternoon, the Senate passed a bill to keep the government open until early March. What's the House going to do?
Well, they're about to pass it, Jake, and guess what? They're going to have to do this again in just over a month's time because this is just a short-term spending bill. It would keep the government open until early March, and at that point, Congress will have to decide once again, shut down the government, pass another short-term extension, or actually pass legislation to keep the government open until the end of the current fiscal year, which ends at the end of September. Remember, they were supposed to pass this back on October 1st, but Congress couldn't get a deal. They passed a short-term extension. That added to the ouster of Kevin McCarthy, the then Speaker, because members on the far right did not like the deal that he cut to allow the government to stay open. He had to step aside. Mike Johnson came in, passed another short-term extension. Johnson said he wouldn't move on any more short-term extension, but guess what? He had to do it facing another shutdown deadline. So they're kicking the can down the road. They're about to pass it in the House, and then once again have to figure out what to do come February as they run into that early March deadline, Jake.
You said kicking the can down the road. Drink. In the bigger picture, you have new reporting about President Trump getting involved to try to scuttle this possible deal on immigration. Democrats and Republicans in the Senate working hard on a deal, and Trump wants to blow it up.
As, of course, this issue, immigration's front and center in the campaign, as Donald Trump has seized on it and is not eager on giving Joe Biden a critical campaign victory, legislative victory, in the heat of this campaign. Jake.
And Manu, they get paid whether they accomplish anything or not, right?
That's absolutely right. They could pass legislation to change that, but okay. I'm not expecting that to happen anytime soon.
I was just checking. Most people, when they have jobs where they don't accomplish anything, they get fired. Anyway, Manu Raju on Capitol Hill. Thanks so much. We're going to keep an eye on that vote on Capitol Hill and the chances of a potential government shutdown. We're going to be right back.
And indeed, we should fire them. That's what we have to do in 2024. Now, before getting to other things, I'll remind you of part of the reason this keeps happening, where we're barely able to avert a shutdown because a big chunk of the GOP refuses to do so. And it's a few reasons. The MAGA ideology is unique for sure, but it's also still premised on your typical the government can't work sort of idea. We're constantly told by Republicans that the government just makes things worse, every situation, which is obviously throwing nuance in the garbage on a subject that necessitates a whole lot of nuance. In certain areas, and for certain things, the government's very effective. In other areas, it's not and shouldn't be present, such as women's reproductive decisions. But the idea that the government can't function and doesn't work lends itself to preventing the government from functioning and breaking it. And so we see that play out, unfortunately. Now, it's not some behind closed doors conspiracy theory where they have some plan and they go implement that plan to destroy the government. But the outcome of their behavior reflects that reality. Meaning, because they aren't motivated to make the government more effective and use it to solve problems where applicable and necessary, because they don't think that's possible, it's not a huge concern to them when it may shut down or when programs aren't funded properly. It's a pretty vicious cycle. You underfund programs, causing them to function ineffectively, and then you point to them functioning ineffectively as proof that we have to gut those programs because they're so ineffective. Crazy. And then the other element, what once was the Tea Party, but now is sort of this MAGA obstruction for political purposes, is once again rearing its ugly head. It has become politically beneficial for much of the Republican Party to just oppose every single thing Biden and Democrats try to do, even if that's as basic as funding the government. Just obstruct, preventing solutions from being implemented. Then go out and campaign on the fact that the other side is horrible at implementing enough solutions. And we're seeing this play out right now in the most ridiculous way imaginable with the $14 billion border deal. Republican Congressman Tom Emmers, as we talked about, admitted that House Republicans are intentionally blocking a deal on the border from getting through. The House specifically. Senate Republicans are working on this with Democrats, but House Republicans, because they don't want to help Biden's approval rating, they're blocking this from getting through the House. And saying that explicitly, Tom Emmers is. It's disgusting. Now, on Mike Johnson potentially being ousted, here is right-wing podcaster Steve Bannon, who coordinates often with Matt Gaetz, Marjorie Greene, etc., saying this.
Okay, I'm not making this up. They're taking a snow day tomorrow. Nicholas Wu is just, the House votes are canceled tomorrow with snow on the way. It hasn't snowed. I mean, you got a couple inches from the other day. It's quite cold. It's called winter. They're taking a snow day tomorrow. Taking a snow day, they're going to jam in a CR. This shows you the irresponsibility. If Johnson pulls these tricks, hey, our thing is get rid of him. Go. You're not the man for the moment. And people say, Steve, you can't say they just got in. No. A leader will emerge. That's what happens in these turnings. Leaders emerge. People that are on the margin come back, and those people are people on the margin, people you never thought about. Grant was a drunk. Lee was down fighting Comanches in Texas. People emerge. Sherman was down at, I think it was LSU, what is now LSU, running a military academy. He told Lincoln in the first months of the war, you're going to have to burn every city in the South. You're going to have to burn the major cities down and break the civilians before these people will give up. They thought he was crazy. Turned out he had an idea and he implemented it.
Get rid of him, go, Steve Bannon says. Yeah, so we could be seeing the Kevin McCarthy situation all over again. And it boils down to MAGA wanting to force Democrats to give them everything that they could ever dream of, which obviously Democrats can't do, even though they are willing to compromise, but they can't give 100% to all the MAGA craziness. And then almost no speakers going to be willing to demand that, as we've seen. They can't say, hey, other side, you have to give me everything the craziest part of my party wants, otherwise we're not talking at all about funding the government. And so then the speaker sees the potential outcome of that sort of governance once they're in the position, and don't want to get blamed for the disaster it would cause. So then we get a situation like this. Once again, an ouster being threatened. Then here's some more reporting on this from Mediaite. Speaker of the House Mike Johnson may be in danger of going the way of his predecessor. The conservative-leaning Washington Examiner is suggesting that if Johnson goes through with a compromise spending deal negotiated with congressional Democrats, he could be ousted in the same manner that Speaker Kevin McCarthy was. And then it goes on to cite quotes from Marjorie, Chip Roy, Eli Crane, and some anonymous Republicans indicating this. So we could be dealing with it again. It's so annoying and crazy. As you saw Jake Tapper feeling the same way, please, my request to you, can we please vote in more serious people? Subscribe to the YouTube channel and become a member at lukebeasleyshow.com/membership.